In this module, we are going to learn how to create your first function in Azure with the help of Azure portal. In order to create any function in Azure portal, we need to first of all create a function app. Then we have to choose the appropriate language. So these are the languages which are currently supported by Azure in order to create the functions at the time of recording this class. For the current use case, we are going to make use of JavaScript, that is making use of the Node.js runtime stack. So we'll make use of this, and subsequently in our coming classes, we will learn one by one to create the function in all of the supported languages. Now there are few prerequisites. You need to have first of all a Azure account. Then we have to create the function app. Function app is basically used in order to host all your functions, that is the related functions, as a logical entity, so that you can easily manage, deploy, scale and share the resources. Once you have successfully created a functions app, then we can create a function for a use case. Also, there is a functionality to test the function right within the Azure portal itself. We will walk you through this. Also, we can monitor our runtime executions of function in the Azure portal itself. Also, we can manage the function keys, with the help of which we can invoke our functions as a HTTP trigger or any other triggers. So also, we will look at other available keys like the admin key as well as the master key or the application level keys. So these are coming under the authorization section. Also, we will have a short look on how the resources are managed by Azure for your functions files. Like suppose if we consider our function is been created with the JavaScript, then where the JavaScript files are stored by the Azure. All those things we will have a look. Now without wasting much time, let's begin with our hands-on. In this class, we are going to learn how to create our functions app in Azure portal. Once you have logged into your Microsoft Azure portal, you will land into this home screen. From the home screen, you can click on function app. Other method is you can search for the function over here in the search bar. And one more method is you can select this portal menu and click on the create resource. It will open the resources for you and you can select the function app. Or else under the favorites, Microsoft has put this functions app in the favorites. You can just click on this or just click on this create button over here in order to straight away get into the functions app creation. Now we will make use of this home screen function app option over here. Click on this function app. Once you click on the functions app, it will list all the functions which are available under your resource group as well as the subscription. Currently, we do not have any of the functions app created within our subscription or the resource group. So in order to create a function app for the first time, we have to click this create function app, or else you can just click on this create button at the left top corner. Click on this. First option it will ask is to select the subscription. You have to select your appropriate subscription. If you have more than one, just select this drop down and select the respective subscription under which you want to bill for this functions app. Next, we have to select the resource group. It is always a good practice in order to create a new resource group whenever you are creating a function app, because you might create n number of functions. Suppose if you are building your functions for order management purpose, you might have n number of functions created which gets triggered whenever an order has been created or order has been shipped or order has been delivered. So all those things you can group under a similar function app under the particular resource group. Coming to the functions app name, here we have to provide the globally unique name which will be unique under the Azure. Let me give BL testing 102. Let's see whether it's available or not. Yeah, it's available. You can see the tick mark, it's over here. So this should be unique because it will create a URL for you, with the help of which you will be able to access your functions. This we will look at the later point of time, how to access our function with the URL. Next, it is asking, do you want to deploy the code or a container image? We can create a Docker image of our functions code and we can deploy. But we will make use of this code because we are going to make use of the Azure portal as a IDE or the editor in order to modify our code and deploy. Next, it is asking for the runtime stack. So these are the currently supported programming languages for the functions. So I will select Node.js. So you can select as per your business requirement or as per the use case. So version, you can select the versions whichever are currently supported by Azure. So I will select the default, that is the latest one. Next comes the region. So I have selected East US, which is the default, but it is always a good practice in order to select the region wherever your customer resides in order to avoid the latency, and also you can abide with the country's law and regulation. Coming to the operating system, suppose if you are creating a function which makes use of exclusively some of the resources of the Linux operating system, then you can go for Linux, or else you can just leave this as Windows by default, because Azure Functions app works natively well on Windows rather than on Linux. It's your choice, the operating system, whatever you like, you can select as per the business requirement. Next, coming to the hosting options. So we are going for the consumption, that is the actual serverless offering of the function. So serverless is the actual concept because of which function got popular in the Azure. Also there is an option to select the premium version of function. If we go with the premium option, then suppose if you are having 2 or 4 functions created within this function app, then at least one instance of all the function will always be running in the Azure, because of which you will be charged little more, because in the consumption model you will pay until when your functions are triggered and is running. But in the case of the premium, one instance of your function is always running, so because of which you will incur more cost. The premium hosting option for functions is used in order to avoid the cold start of the function. Suppose if your function is not used for a particular predefined tab, then your functions instance will be removed from the memory. So whenever a new request comes, function has to be loaded into the memory and it will delay your functions invocation time. It will avoid the cold start, as at least one instance of every function is available in the memory. It will be like a warm start. Immediately whenever there is a trigger, your functions will be initiated. Next comes the app service plan, which means you can have a dedicated virtual machines running your functions. So this will incur further more charges compared to premium version. Here you can scale up, scale down the virtual machines. Next, click on the storage. Azure will create a unique storage account. So based on the code, whatever you are using, it will create a blob storage queue or the table in order to store the file for your function. So you can create a U1 if you are not happy with the Microsoft default naming convention. Now clicking on the networking. So this I am not modifying. So we want our function to be enabled from the public access as well. If you want it to enable for network injection, you can select. So by default, it will be off. Click on next and monitoring. So here you can enable the application insight. So application insight is one more monitoring offerings by Azure. So with the help of application insight, you can have the runtime as well as the historical data of your functions execution. So I'm selecting no, but you can select yes if you want the application insight. Click on next. Here it will ask you to configure the GitHub repository. So if you want to have the CI/CD enabled for your functions app, then you can select it enable and you can populate the details for your GitHub account. So I'm not selecting this, but if you want, you can just select or enable this option. Next, coming to the tag, here you can populate the tag in order to get the billing details for this function or to manage this resource. Now once you are happy with all the configuration, click on this review and create. Here you can view all the details whatever you have populated in the tabs while creating the function. Once you are happy, click on this create button. So it will take some couple of seconds in order to deploy your functions app. Our functions app has been deployed or created successfully. Once successfully created, you will get a pop-up on the right top corner. You can click on the go to resources and see the functions app which you have created. From the overview section for this functions app, you can stop this functions app. You can just restart. You can get the details of all the things. You can see the execution counts. Currently, we do not have any functions created within this function app. Going ahead in our classes, we will create one function and we will test our function. At that time, it will show the details like the memory usage, execution count, and for how many seconds it has run. So based on which billing will happen in this. So we have completed this section, that is creating a function app from this documentation. So next part is creating the HTTP trigger function, which we will see in our next class. In this class, we are going to create a HTTP trigger function. In order to invoke a function, we need to have a trigger. In this case, we are making use of the HTTP trigger so that the function will be triggered for any request what we make over HTTP protocol. You can have a look on this documentation if you are stuck anywhere while practicing this class. Now, without wasting much time, let's begin with our hands-on. So in our previous class, we had created this functions app and we had got into this functions app. We had the basic overview on what is this overview option available for the functions app. So if you don't know how to navigate through this, or you have missed the navigation, or you are continuing this class after some time, then what you can do is you can just click on this search bar over here and select the functions app. Or else you can just type here the function. It will list the function app under the services. Click on this. Once you click on the functions app, it will list all the functions app which have been created under the particular subscription and the resource group. I'm having only one function app created, that is this one, BL testing 102. I will click on this. Just minimize this bar over here. It will take me to the overview section of the functions app. In this class, as we are creating our very first function within this application, we need to select the functions option which is under the functions over here. So click on this functions. As of now, we don't have any function created within this function app. In order to create the first function, click on this create button. First, it will ask the development environment. I'm having this develop in Python option. Suppose if you are developing this function with the help of the VS Code or any other editor, you can select this option. So this we will look in our classes going ahead. Currently, I'm developing with the help of Portal. Next, Azure is having few of the templates, so we can click on this and it will generate the boilerplate code for us. So we don't have to sit and write the code from scratch. If we select any of the options, it will create the boilerplate code. So our responsibility is just to focus on the business requirement rather than focusing on writing or generating the code for function from scratch, which will be initiated with the help of this queue trigger, topic trigger, storage trigger. I will select this HTTP trigger as I want our function to be triggered with the help of the HTTP request. Now if you scroll down, it will ask for the new function. So this function name should be unique within our functions app, that is this BL testing 102. So if you remember this BL testing 102, which is the functions app name, it should be unique globally within the Azure. But this functions name, it should be unique only within our function app. I am keeping this default. If you want, you can just change this. Coming to the authorization level, there are three kind of authorizations available. So function, if we select, it will be needing the function key in order to access this function. If we select this anonymous option over here under the authorization level, then this function could be invoked by anyone without any security. Coming to the admin, so there is a master key concept. We will have a look on this in detail in our coming classes, like what this admin master key stands for, what is the anonymous or the function key in detail. So as of now, I am selecting this function key over here. With the help of the function key, we will be authenticating our request or authorizing our request calls, which are being made over the HTTP protocol. So once you select all the details, click on the create button. So it will take couple of seconds in order to create. So once created, it will straight away take you to the new function which you have created. Suppose if it doesn't take you to the function which you have created, then what you can do is within the functions app, click on these functions. It will list all the functions which are part of this functions app. So as we have created HTTP trigger 1, select this. So when we create any function in the Azure, it will create a boilerplate code for us, so which can initiate or get the request from the HTTP triggers. Now as we are making use of the Azure portal in order to create our functions app, we are not using any editor like the VS Code or any other editors. So we can select this code plus test option over here. Now this is creating a function which will receive the request over HTTP protocol. Context is the first parameter which will hold the metadata of the function, like what was the HTTP method used in order to trigger this function. So what are the HTTP methods available, like the get, post, so and so forth things, and the request. This is the request input bindings for us, with the help of which we can extract the body as well as the query parameters, path parameters, so and so forth things, as well as there is the response parameter as well, which is used to bind the response bindings over here or the output bindings. So in detail in our next class, we will learn what are the bindings and the trigger configurations used in this function. So overall, this function is just checking for the name. This function is like a hello world program, wherein it is checking whether name has been sent as a query parameter in the request or the name has been sent in a body. So it is extracting request.body or request.body.name. It is extracting. So if it is S, then it is typing hello and the name. So this HTTP triggered function executed successfully. If the name has not been sent neither in the query parameter nor in the body, then we are sending one message like this HTTP trigger function executed successfully, but the name has not been passed. So once we generate this message, then we will create a body over here with the help of context.rest. We are passing this message back. So this is the boilerplate code which Azure has created whenever we create any function. For any function in the Azure, there are three associations. One is the trigger. In this case, we are triggering this function with the help of HTTP request, but the functions could be triggered whenever a file has been placed in a blob storage, or it can be triggered with the any storage things like the queue, table insertions, and so forth things. So one is the trigger, how the function is triggered. Next association is the input bindings, that is the request over here, and another is the output binding, that is the response. So those associations we have whenever we create a function in Azure. So context must be the first parameter or the argument when we create a function. Next comes the request. If there is any input requirement, we can create a binding like this for passing the request into the function, and if there is some response to be sent back to the service consumer for this function, then we can make use of this REST output bindings, which is the output binding in this case. Now if you see this drop down, there are a couple of files over here. our code will be stored in this index.js. So if you click on this function.js, it will hold the details for our function association. As I told, it will have a trigger point. In this case, it's a HTTP trigger. So these are the placeholders which Microsoft uses in order to identify the trigger. HTTP trigger, you shouldn't alter anything over here. So these are case sensitive. Authorization level, as I had shown, there are 3 authorization levels. One is a function, admin, other is a anonymous. So next is what is our input binding, that is direction is in. So this section, whatever you see, is for the input configuration. So input configuration in our case is a type is a HTTP trigger, authorization level is a function, direction is in. It means that this is the binding details for the input association. Next comes the name is the request over here, and it is supporting get and the post HTTP methods. Coming to the output, there is this direction object element over here which signifies it's the out binding details. Here type is a HTTP, as we are sending this message back over the HTTP protocol itself, and the binding is the REST. So those things you shouldn't alter. So if you want to alter anything, you can make use of this integrations tab over here. So whatever details you had seen in the functions.json file, it will show in the background view over here in the integration. As I told, in order to invoke any function, we need to have a trigger as well as the input bindings. In this case, the trigger is the HTTP. Click on this. In our case, the input binding is the request, that is the parameter. So in this only we will send the request query parameters or the body. Coming to the authorization level, from here also we can change the authorization level. If you want to change the settings what you had provided while creating the functions, you can come to this trigger and you can change from function to anonymous or to admin. Next comes the selected HTTP methods. Here currently by default it is selecting get and post. If you don't want get, just uncheck this, or if you want to add some other HTTP methods like the post or the put, you can select it over here. Accordingly, you can write your code and you can extract this HTTP method, and for each method you can have a separate piece of code in the function. So it's always a good practice to have your functions code created very light. If you have a requirement wherein you have to write the complex functions code, then you can split your functions code into multiple functions and you can avoid the complexity of this function. So if you want to change anything, you can change the settings over here. So as I told, if you want to change the request parameter name, you can change from here. Don't change from the functions.json. If you change over here, it will reflect over functions.json file as well. Now I don't want to change anything. Let me just close this. Now coming to the function, you can just click on this. It will take you back to the code plus test view over here. Now let me go back to this integrations. Then we will see this output binding, that is the HTTP response variable in our case. In the code, as we had seen, we had this res parameter which will hold the output binding details, in which we had passed the message as a body in the HTTP response to the service consumer. So if you want to change this binding type, you can just change. As we have created the HTTP trigger, it is not allowing us to change the binding type. Suppose if your binding type is something different, then you can change the binding over here, or you can altogether delete this binding itself. Now let me just close this. This is all about the integrations option over here. So whatever we had seen in the integrations, it will have the same details in the functions.json file as well over here. So in our next class, we will see how to test this function. In this class, we will learn how to test this function right from the Azure portal. Now if you see the options over here in the top, we will have this option, that is test/run. So we can click on this button over here, or the option. It will open the testing wizard on the right side. Like here, it will ask the key which we have to use in order to invoke the function. So we can invoke this function with the help of the function key. We can invoke this with the host key, and by default it's the host key itself. Master key is the admin level key with the help of which we can invoke any function or manage any function in the functions app. We should be very careful so that we don't share this key with any client applications. This should be residing only with the admin of your Azure portal. In the real or the production scenario, you won't be sharing this host key. Either you will share the functions key, and there are other methods how the users can authenticate, or the applications can authenticate if they want to interact with the functions. We will see in detail how the applications will authorize as well as the authenticate any request when they make a call to these functions with the help of access keys. So if you want, you can just change this to function key and you can just test. Click on this run. So we had not selected this application insights, so we won't get any details over here. If you have selected the application insights for monitoring purpose, you can see the logs over here. So I will go for this file system logs and run this again. We are getting a message that is hello Azure, this HTTP trigger function executed successfully. This we got because in the input we had sent the name parameter over here, that is the Azure. in the code, it is checking whether the name parameter is there or not. If there is a name parameter, then it is typing hello and the name whatever we have passed and this message. Now if you see, it has typed the information over here. It is because of this context. So context is the first argument when we create a function in Azure. So this is the first argument. Next comes the input request binding name. So with the help of context, we can extract the metadata of the functions at runtime. We can make use of this context argument in order to log the details over here in the application inside as well as in the file system log. So whatever message you have provided, it is showing over here. You can even log the context variable itself over here in the file system log for the application insights, that is context.log, and then we can write the context itself over here. Done. Put the semicolon. If you see over here, whenever you modify, you have to save your code. So once you click on the save, then only you run, else whatever was previously saved, that only will execute and type over here. So I will clear the logs. Let me just close this and clear the log, and once again click on this test and run. Go to input. This time we won't provide any name, rather we will just click on this run. So this time it should come to this conditional otherwise case, that this HTTP function executed successfully but without the name. So here if you see the response, that is telling this HTTP trigger function executed successfully but pass the name in the query string. So we didn't pass any name over here while passing. Suppose if you are selecting this get and adding the parameter, here if you see, it is searching for the query parameter, that is name. If there is no query parameter, then it is searching for it in the body. Now I will add the name over here and I will enter beenumlearning. So before hitting on run, we will see the log of the previous run. So here if you see, first we had typed this JavaScript HTTP trigger function, some message, and then we had tried to log the context itself. Now here if you see, it will have the invocation ID. This is the unique runtime invocation ID for your function. Then any attributes, if there is, it will show over here. Then it will have a element over here with the name of execution context. It will have the details on binding, like what was the method used, that is the post, what was the URL used. So this code is the authorization key. We had selected the master key over here. So if you want, you can change to the function key, and the function key, it will show over here. What is the original URL, what was the header, if there is any header, it will show over here. And in the case of the body, it will have the body parameter. Now we will test this with the HTTP method get, and we will make use of this functions key and the name we are passing as a query. Click on run. We are getting a message, hello, beenumlearning, as we had selected this HTTP method as get. Our function is capable of processing the request in get as well as post. So in this code, boilerplate code what Microsoft has generated, they are not validating the HTTP methods. So they are handling the request with the help of this conditional operator and checking for the name and executing. But in the real life, for the actual use case, you will check this HTTP method. Suppose if your function you are designing to handle request with various HTTP methods. Now if you see the log over here, our query parameter, whatever we had passed over here, it is sent in the URL. If you see over here, the beenumlearning name put in the query parameter. Also there is a query parameter over here, with the help of which we can extract the name. If there is any value, we can just pull out from here. So like this, we can test the functions within the Azure portal without the need of using the Postman or any other clients. In our previous class, we had seen how to test the function right from the Azure portal with the help of this test run option available over here. Now if you want to have a look on previously run instances for your function, then you can just click on this monitor over here. So this will list all the previously run instances for your function. Currently I have not enabled this application inside. Suppose if you have enabled the application inside, it will list all the previously run records. It's always a good practice in order to enable the application inside. Suppose if you have not enabled application inside previously while creating the function or the function app, you can just click on this configure and you can turn on the insights. So coming to the authorization level, we had three types of authorization. One is a function key, next was the admin, and other was anonymous. Anonymous, if we select, this function could be called by anyone across the web. If you click on this, it will show the key over here. You can just copy and make use of this while invoking any functions app. Now first of all, we will go to this code plus test view again and get the functions URL, with the help of which we can invoke this function and get the details. Now if you click on this get function URL, it will show the URL in order to invoke this function. Here if you see in the URL, as we had provided this BL testing 102, as I told, this should be a globally unique name in order to call your function. Copy this, create a new tab in your browser, click on enter. Now here if you see, there is this code section. Here in the code, it is sending the functions key. Now in the message we are getting this HTTP triggered function executed, but pass a name. So our function is checking for the name in the query parameter. I will add the query parameter over here, that is the name, and I will write as beenum learning. Hit on enter. Now we are getting a message, hello beenum learning, this HTTP triggered function executed successfully. Now as you can see, there are a couple of parameters. One is a name, other is a code over here. So in the code, this is used in order to authorize your request. So this code you can pass a function key, as well as you can pass the admin key, that is the app level key, as well as the master key. Coming to the function key, this is the same key what is starting with ytdz. So it is this function key ytdz. Same thing we can copy and we can replace over here in the code. Suppose if you want to share key with your client application, you can share this function key, so that client application will have access to only to this particular function within your functions app. Now if you want to know about other keys which are available, you have to go to this application back, that is the function application, and click on the app key. When you click on this app key, it will list all the keys available over here. So one is a default key, that is the application key. We can copy this. Just click on this copy icon and replace whatever we have over here in the code view. Just delete and paste this application key. Click on enter. Now here this function is validating with the help of application level key. So with the help of this default key, we can authorize any functions invocation within this application. Suppose if you have 10 functions created, then you can authorize to all the functions call with the help of this default. Now there is this admin key, master key. With the help of this, you can administer or manage any functions within this function app. So you shouldn't share this master key with anyone, any of the client applications, because with the help of this, they can be able to manage the functions app. Now let me just copy this and invoke our function with the help of this master key. So as this is the admin key, it will have access to do anything with this function. Let me just replace it and click on enter. So these are the three ways how you can access your functions. One is the master key, default, and the function key itself. Now this default key, this you can delete, as well as the function key you can delete, and you can regenerate the new one. If you click on this renew key value, it will ask you for the pop-up, and click on renew key. It will change the key value. As part of the security, it's a good practice to change your key once in 3 months or in 90 days. Coming to the last section of this module, we will see how the code of your functions are stored in the Azure with the help of storage account. If you click on this overview for your functions app, you can see the list of all the details over here. So in the resource group, if you click, it has created a storage account for you. So click on this storage account. You can identify with the help of the region wherever you have created this functions app. Now if you click on this storage browser, here you will get the details of all the things Azure has created. Now if you click on this blob container, it has created the web job host and the secret by default. If you click on this file share, you will get the list of all the file directories created by Azure. Now as we have only one functions created in our functions app, it has created this BL testing 102 in order to store all the function details of our application, that is BL testing 102 function code. So you can just explore this file share and you can get into this directory and you can change the index.json file as well as the function.json, but we don't recommend changing with the help of storage account. Make use of this Azure portal in order to modify anything in your code or your function. So if you come to this overview section again, as we had tested our function couple of times, here it will show how many times we had tested our function. So it is showing the count 8 and how much memory it has consumed. It has consumed 324 MB of memory. And if you see for how many seconds it has run in milliseconds, that is for 216.58K, it has run for so and so megabytes milliseconds time. The billing for the function is getting calculated based on this gigabyte second it has run in the Azure. So we will learn in depth the concepts of function going ahead in our classes.